When we left off in part 1, I had told y'all how I had pissed Karen off when she asked me what she should do about the fact that she had taken double the dosage of her psychiatric medication. And I told her she should follow up with her doctor, and she should also ask them to increase her dosage, because she had behaved like a normal human being for the first time in years. And we'd been the beneficiaries of her mistake. It was at that moment I realized that I needed to do a better job of managing my emotions and what came out of my mouth. My job had a wellness program, and they had hired a life coach, and she was doing workshops and one-on-one sessions that were covered by our health plan. So I decided to take one of her workshops, and that workshop changed my life. It helped me to see how our thoughts are what feed our emotions, not what other people do. We have thoughts about what they do, but it's how we engage with those thoughts that inform the emotions that result. And the amount of power that we give to those thoughts and emotions is what determines how we're going to react or respond. See, reaction is muscle memory. It's what you always do. It's your natural instincts. My natural instinct when somebody's doing what Karen was doing was to knock their head off their shoulders. But since that wasn't an option, it wasn't a viable one, I had to come up with something else. I had to learn to respond well. And since I hadn't knocked her head off her shoulders, it was obvious that I had not been reacting. But the truth of the matter is, on the surface, I was responding well, and internally, I was dying. I would respond well in her office to some of her machinations. And then I'd go in my office, close the door, and cry my eyes out. Because the fact that I couldn't put my hands around her throat would have me about ready to explode. I wasn't crying because I was weak or scared. I was crying because I couldn't beat the snot out of her. You want to know just how bad it was? Here's the straw that broke the camel's back, even for the HR manager and the department director. I was hospitalized for 4 days. The woman sent me 18 text messages the first 2 days, 7 of which I received while I was inside an MRI machine, while I was being diagnosed with a brain tumor. Karen was harassing me for not calling her to call out of work, despite the fact that my husband had called the HR manager, which is who was supposed to be called, because I'd been hospitalized and she needed to send FMLA paperwork to the hospital. The HR manager had already received that paperwork, and she'd already informed Karen that I would be out of the office until further notice. Karen had decided that in addition to contacting HR, I was supposed to call her too. And I was supposed to call her every day that I was going to be out of the office to call out. She was aware that I'd been hospitalized. That would automatically mean that I would not be in the office, at least until I'd been released from the hospital. It would stand to reason that I would not contact my employer again until at least the point at which I'd been discharged from the hospital. But in her mind, I was supposed to contact her. I was also supposed to respond to her text messages. I responded to one, informing her that the HR manager had all of the information, and if she needed any additional information as who she should contact, but she should discontinue contacting me. Not only was it unnecessary and unacceptable, but it was a violation of the Federal Medical Leave Act. It was also harassment and unempathetic. And her response was to continue texting me. I screenshotted all of the text messages, and I emailed them to the HR director for the entire organization, the director of the department, the HR manager, and her direct supervisor. When I returned to work, I had a new supervisor, and I learned from my coworkers that she hadn't been seen for over a week because she'd been suspended. But it took all of that for them to actually do something. But well before we got to that point, I had to do something. I realized that I couldn't control what she did or didn't do. I couldn't control what the HR manager did or didn't do. I couldn't control what her supervisor, the director, the HR director for the entire organization did or didn't do. The only person who I controlled was me. And I was going to have to figure out how to stop having migraine headaches after working with her, how to stop dissolving into tears because I couldn't strangle her, how to be unaffected by her choosing to be who she was. I had to figure out how to lean in to who I was, how to take my power back, how to stop abdicating responsibility for my own emotions to a woman whose responsibility it was not to manage how her behavior impacted me. That was all on me. And thank God for Kami Andrea, the life coach that the organization had hired. Because when I was done with that workshop, I didn't know everything I needed to know. But I was well on my way to learning how to temper myself, to learning how to authentically respond well, to not just be unaffected outwardly, but to be unaffected inwardly. And then I started one-on-one coaching with her. I told her exactly what I was dealing with and exactly what my goals were. I couldn't change my supervisor, and I couldn't leave my job because I had to be obedient to God's will. And in that understanding, I knew that it was also his will that I learned the lesson, that I learned how to allow people to do whatever, say whatever, and not make it personal, to not make their malfunction, their dysfunction, their ignorance, their stupidity, their disrespect about me, because it wasn't. I had to learn how to put what other people did and said in perspective, to recognize what was going on under the surface, to recognize what their goals were, and to recall my own power, to choose who I would be, how I would show up, even in moments of adversity, even when all of the odds were stacked against me, even when the powers that be were operating from a space of evil and mental illness. I had to learn to choose, to command the spiritual environment around me, to protect my own peace, to find contentment, no matter where I found myself, and to live with joy, no matter what the circumstances were. And the minute that I did, I stopped being affected by her shenanigans. When she was out of pocket or out of order, I utilized the system at my disposal. I documented, I reported. When she crossed a boundary, I pushed her back over it. I stood firm and confident in my nose, and I was unaffected by the tantrums she threw when she was unable to control me. As much as I hated having the experience, I had to recognize that I needed it. It taught me some valuable things, not only about other people, not only about employers, but about God, about myself, about the power that God has given me, about just how true it is that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, about how much we literally control what happens in our own minds, and about how little effort people actually expend to regulate what's happening in their minds. There are people who get angry and they say the worst thing they could possibly think of, solely for the purposes of trying to hurt someone else. Why? Because if someone said those things to them, they'd be devastated. And it would never occur to them that there are actually people out here who have learned to emotionally regulate. And as a result, we see through that tactic every time. We understand that it comes from the pits of hell. We understand what it means about the hateful person who's spewing the hate, how little it actually has to do with us. They think that when you don't respond, it's because you're a punk or because they're right. When in actuality, it's because you know what you're capable of. And you've learned to temper yourself, to keep yourself out of prison and out of hell. And to keep people who are too stupid to keep themselves safe. You've learned not to let what other people do have you on the altar repenting because you failed to respond well to provocation that you know comes from the pits of hell and from someone else's unregulated emotions. And I can assure you from personal real-world experience that when you respond well, the situations only work out one of a few ways. The person recognizes that they cannot goad you into being emotionally irresponsible like they are, so they go the hell away. Or their inability to get a rise out of you infuriates them, so they keep going and going, working themselves up into a complete and total frenzy until they go too far. And the jails and the graveyards are full of emotionally unregulated individuals who have gone too far. Before that supervisor went too far for HR, she went too far for her own safety. She and I had a difference of opinion about a state regulation related to both of our jobs. As the subject matter expert, I'd shared my professional opinion with her, and she disagreed. She stated all of the reasons why she disagreed, and I listened. Since I'd already stated my opinion and the basis for that opinion, I said absolutely nothing. When the conversation was done, she sent an email to my contact at the oversight entity responsible for that particular regulation, and she did not copy me. Several days later, my contact forwarded me that email and asked for my professional opinion. And I provided my contact the same opinion that I'd provided her. And then I continued doing my job. Several days later, that individual responsible for oversight of that regulation emailed her back with a final decision. The final decision was to go with my recommendation. And she was pissed. She called me into her office because when he responded to her email, he CC'd me. And included in that communication thread was the forward to me requesting my opinion and my response. So when she called me into her office, she wanted answers. She wanted to know why I would provide him with an opinion that was different from hers. And being an emotionally regulated individual, I informed her that he'd asked for my professional opinion. He didn't ask me for hers. The opinion that I'd provided him was the same one that I'd provided her. And then she reminded me of our lengthy discussion, where she had told me all of the reasons why my opinion should change to hers. And when she was done, I informed her that I'd heard her position the first time, and my position hadn't changed. She was confused. She wanted to know why I didn't tell her that day. And I told her that when the conversation had begun, I'd told her my position. There was no point in that conversation where I told her my position had changed. So there was no reason why she should have assumed that sharing her opinion would, could, or did change mine. Getting nowhere with that, she wanted to know why I had the unmitigated gall to insert myself in their discussion. I pointed her to the point of the email where he contacted me. She wanted to know why I didn't confer with her before I responded. And I asked why I would need her permission to provide my professional opinion on a subject that was in my purview. She told me that it was insubordination to provide an opinion that was different than hers, that we should have been a united front. I told her that it was unfortunate that she saw it that way, but I didn't. And then I told her to have a great evening, and I returned to my office. Pissed, she stormed into my office, started yelling and screaming, while I sat calmly behind my desk. She repeated almost everything she'd already said, and not hearing any questions, I provided zero commentary. Pissed, she walked around my desk and stood behind my chair. So I decided since she wouldn't leave my office, I would. Unfortunately, when I jumped up out of my chair, it rolled back and hit her. We both immediately went to HR. Well, she went to the HR manager's office and I called the HR manager on the phone. Unfortunately, though, her adult tantrum had been overheard by all of my office neighbors. They heard her yelling and screaming, and they heard me saying, "This is highly inappropriate and very unprofessional. Please leave my office. I feel uncomfortable. Why are you walking towards me? Please don't stand behind me." And from their vantage point, it sounded like I was in danger. Several of them called HR, and one called security. So when she reported that I hit her with my chair, her story was in competition with mine and the stories of 3 other individuals. I'm sure you can imagine that her position as my supervisor and mine as her subordinate did not shield her from the repercussions of attempting to intimidate an employee, invading someone's personal space, and failing to respect an employee's right to feel safe. That bump on the knee was the least of her concerns. Was there a place in me that would have liked to have knocked her head between the washer and the dryer? Absolutely. But seeing her attempts to get me in trouble for her inability to control herself completely fail and backfire, resulting in her being written up, was all the gift I needed. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.